Hi. Hello. Good evening. My name is Christina, and on behalf of Los Angeles Public Library, welcome and thank you for joining us this evening for this very special financial workshop, Education and Tuition Planning. This workshop is part of a series of programs for Financial Planning Week, which was made possible by the Financial Planning Association of Los Angeles. So thank you to them and to all of their financial planning volunteers. We will have a financial education workshop every day for the rest of this week at 6 p.m. The workshops are streamed live right back here on LAPL's Facebook and YouTube channel. Also on Saturday, we will have free private telephone consultations with certified financial planners. You can discuss your personal finance questions. It's pro bono service, completely free, no strings attached. As of right now, though, however, all appointments have been filled, but you can sign up for their waiting list. To learn more, visit lapl.org/financial planning. And before we begin, just a couple more last housekeeping items. Feel free to ask questions during the presentation in the comments section, which we'll try to answer them live as we go, but we'll address questions at the end as well. Also, this is a publicly viewable streaming program, so just be mindful when you're in the comment section or asking a question, just be to not disclose any private information. And with that being said, we will get into it and hand it off to Grant Hartwell, who is our speaker for today. So thank you so much, Grant, and take it away.
I am so happy to be here. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Like you said, my name is Grant Hartwell, and I am a financial advisor. And I'm affiliated with the Financial Planning Association of Los Angeles. I also have my certified financial planning designation. So I've really spent a lot of time over the last 10 years or so getting familiar with the ins and outs of financial planning in general, and definitely with the planning for college education. So I'm excited to share with you how you can, plan for college, whether you're a parent or whether you're an individual just thinking ahead. We're going to go through a lot, and hopefully you find this information informative. Like I said, please feel free to pepper me with questions along the way. So this presentation was put together by the Financial Planning Association. I've made a few updates. The information in here is a few years old. I've done that. I've gone and updated some of the numbers as much as possible, but in general, the principles will be staying the same. So if you see a number that's a little out of date, don't be alarmed. But let's just take it from there. And let's see here. So I'm going to be going through this deck, but I just want to let you know a couple things. I already mentioned it might be out of date just a little bit. And also we're going to be talking about some investments as in part of the plan or part of the presentation. And I do want to let you know this really shouldn't be constituted necessarily as advice. And if you are thinking about making any specific investment decisions, I would recommend consulting with your financial advisor on that. This is more so meant to be educational and not specific advice. So high level, we're going to go through a couple things. Started off, we'll talk about, why do we want to plan for college? What's the benefit? Then we'll consider a few ways that you can save and pay for college. And then talking about college planning in conjunction with the rest of your financial planning and how to keep your child involved along the way. So we all have our reasons for wanting to go to college or wanting a family member to, but really I would also like to expand that definition of higher education. Some people do choose to go to a traditional 4-year college, and other people pursue vocational education. They really know they want to be a trade. Maybe they want to bend neon, or maybe they want to be a carpenter. So, there really are a lot of ways to pursue higher education, and the information here can be applied to more than just the traditional 4-year sense of higher education. But no matter which avenue you pursue, there really are a lot of benefits. There's the personal growth, so on and so forth. But I really want to stick with that word right at the top of the page, and that's motivation, because we're going to get into some of the details on the financial piece. And I know from working with people that talking about money and thinking about how am I going to pay for this or that when I have other expenses and bills due, it can get a little overwhelming. So really take a moment to anchor your motivation for why you want to save for higher education, and hold it close to your heart, because that's going to see you through some of the more challenging moments along the way. So going to a traditional a bachelor's program, this can have a very impactful financial benefit to the individual who attends that university or college. There are a lot of degrees of education you can achieve, and I've just narrowed it down to a few here. And this is based on census information from 2015. So again, this is a little out of date, but the idea is that pursuing advanced degrees can and often does correlate to a higher earning potential over your lifetime. So this is one of the strongest motivations people often have for pursuing higher education. But I won't. It's a little bit of a caveat, because it's definitely not a guarantee. And it's not to say that just because you don't have a bachelor's degree doesn't mean you can't earn more than $34,000 a year. So, because we all know that's certainly not the case. But again, this is something to keep in mind. So when we're starting to talk about planning for the cost of college, we kind of start the conversation by considering, well, what is it actually going to cost in total? So currently, the average institution is going to vary in its cost depending on whether it's private and whether it's in-state and whether it's public. So here's just a few examples. But 1 year of college at a private institution might cost upwards of $40,000, and that's going to take into consideration a few factors. So multiply that by 4, and you're looking at a pretty big bill. But not only that, but that is the cost of college in today's dollars and right now. And when we start looking at saving for college education costs for a student who might not attend for another 10, maybe 20 years, what we have to factor in is inflation. So what you'll see on this page is the projected cost of college for those same institutions in 10 years. And what we're using here is a 5% inflation rate. So typical inflation, your groceries, your cost of movies, that's going to be around 2.5%, maybe get up a little bit higher than that, but call it 2.5%. College has historically inflated at a higher rate, so 5% more so. So while the cost of a gallon of milk might not change all that much, in 10 years, it's actually going to cost quite a bit more to go to the same institution that maybe you attended when, back in the good old days when a credit cost $15 and I could get a cup of coffee for a nickel. But why we bring that up, not to overwhelm you, but just to make sure that you have a clear sense of this is the size of the financial goal that you are trying to solve for. So, and this is a point in the conversation where I really think that parents and their children should connect and talk about, this is going to be, if a child is planning on going to college, and I'm making some assumptions here, but let's say it's just the typical high school graduate, and they're maybe 18, 19, maybe they are, waiting a year or two and they're going at 20. This is still going to be probably one of the biggest financial decisions that person will have ever made in their life. And that is to take on the responsibility of paying for maybe $150,000 or more, maybe less, of education costs. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how you can save and meet these goals, meet this cost. But it's something to keep in mind that it's not just a parent deciding that their child should go to school and then the child does it and okay, now you're responsible for paying off the debt you accrued to accomplish that. This really needs to be a conversation with the parent, talking with the child about, hey, there's all these really good reasons, and this evidence shows that you could earn more in your lifetime by attending college. But you also have to realize that you're going to be paying back a fairly large sum of money. And I want you to make sure that you're facing this decision head on and not with sort of the blinders up, so to speak, and just think about, oh, I'll deal with it later. So there are a few ways that you can reduce costs, prior to it. You could take an advanced placement course. You could, really be specific about your strategy for which college you're attending. Maybe you're doing a community college and transferring. Maybe you're living at home along the way. But whatever it is, I still want to focus that it's going to be a large chunk of money if you're really going to plan on attending a 4-year college. So while you might be able to reduce the costs, we really want to think about what are the different ways we can account for the total bill at the end of the day. So here's what we have it sort of broken out between these different categories. You got scholarships, you can get grants, we can do work study, we can do loans, and we can also be saving and investing ahead of time. So I'm going to take a minute to discuss some of these one by one, and then I'm going to start with sort of the scholarship, grants, work study, loans option, and I'm going to dovetail that into the savings and investing piece. So I'm sorry, I got a little ahead of myself earlier. Parents and kids, make sure you're talking. I think we already covered that, but it bears repeating. This is a big decision. So with the scholarships, so a lot of times people say, I hear them say at least, I'm not too worried about it. My kid is smart. I'm just going to assume they're going to get the scholarships they need for a full ride, and it's going to be all said and done, no big deal. I would caution against banking too heavily on a full ride. While it certainly is possible, it is competitive to get the kinds of scholarships. Everyone wants college to be paid for 100%. There's no doubt about that. So while it certainly is possible, and when you can get a really good scholarship and you don't have to repay it, this is kind of like the best bet. But really, it's so hard to get some of these scholarships sometimes that, or maybe you only get scholarships that cover a portion of the cost. I just want to say it again. I wouldn't bank on getting a scholarship that's going to give you a full ride. If that happens, great, and all the other prep work, no big deal. But go into it assuming that you might have to supplement scholarships with some other form of income or savings. But before I move on, this is some of the information around where you can find scholarships, and I'd say start early, start researching this now. Talk to your guidance counselors. Maybe your employer has something set up for the kids of its employees. Maybe there's a fund set up at the Financial Planning Association. Who knows? So take a look at some of these websites, research scholarships that you might be able to apply for, and make it part of the process along the way. Now, the second piece of the puzzle that I want to talk about for a minute is financial aid. This is something that everyone has to fill out the FAFSA, and the amount of financial aid you qualify for will be dependent upon a number of different factors. It's going to be incorporating the parent's income. It's going to be looking at any assets the student owns directly, as well as assets that the family owns directly, not in a retirement account. So again, while financial aid is an important component of covering the cost of college, this is only one piece of the puzzle. And if you want a little bit more information about that, maybe what you might potentially qualify for, I would refer you to the College Board website. They have a wealth of information where a number of the other slides in this presentation came from. So there are also grants and work study programs and loans. So there's a few different prongs to this puzzle, and that's why it really bears mentioning that you want to dedicate some time to figuring it all out. In some ways, it's a little bit of a labyrinth, and you kind of got to figure out, like, all right, I got this over there, got that over there. In college, oftentimes students are allowed to participate in work study programs. That is when they're actually working during college. At any rate, there also are loans. So loans are not all loans are created equally. And I don't have too much information on here, but basically, the thing to know there is that they do have to be paid back. So, and I think this comes back to that piece where we were talking a little bit earlier about the conversation with parents and their children, or the person who's going to be ultimately paying back that loan. If the child is responsible for the loan that they are going to be, paying upon completion of college, they should really understand this is what it takes to pay back a debt. So one way you can incorporate that into the conversation is, next time you're paying bills, just invite your child to come and see what it's like. Talk to them about what is debt. What does it feel like to have debt? I mean, most people do. We have maybe credit card debt, or a house, or maybe it's an auto loan. But one way or another, there's this sort of cycle that we're all involved in, and for the most part, we're going to be required to pay that money back. So if you haven't involved your children in the conversation around what it takes to pay off debt, I would start with that and just say, hey, you're going to college, you're going to be taking on these loans, and just make sure that you talk to them about that. I'm getting a little feedback that maybe there is some audio issues. I'm going to switch my my mic here 1 second. Bear with me for a sec. All right, apologies. I'm going to try this. All right. All right. Okay, I just tried switching my microphone. If the folks listening let me know that that is any better, please indicate. And if not, I'm just going to go on assuming that you can hear me all right. So back to this presentation. And thank you as you're bearing with us in this age of digital meetings. So here's another piece of the puzzle. All right, so we've talked about scholarships, we talked about grants, we talked about loans. So another big piece of the pie is savings that you can accumulate ahead of time to offset the cost of college. So this really is where you have the most control, because, okay, while you might not qualify for or you might not get the scholarship you hope to get, and maybe you don't get the most favorable loan, if you have savings ahead of time, this really can be a powerful piece of the puzzle. So first and foremost, if you have a child and you think that you're going to want to help them with their college costs, it's not too early to start saving. Even if they just did even if they just had their first birthday, start now and save what you can, and also use interest to your advantage. And I'm going to talk about that in a sec here when I get into the investment piece. So some of the things to take into consideration, because in some ways this is just a mathematical equation. So we're going to be looking at the cost of college, and then we're going to be looking at how long until they attend, and then also what can you earn on your savings over time. But don't forget you have other financial goals here. Just because you have a child that you want to see go to a great school and not have a lot of debt when they graduate does not mean you can or should necessarily abandon your other financial goals. So I have a piece here about what I was calling buckling your own seatbelt first. So really, if you as a parent are considering helping your child with the cost of college or another form of higher education, I would encourage you to just take a moment to reflect on your own personal financial situation first. And that is, one, do you have an emergency fund set up? I always recommend people have 3 to 6 months of their household expenses saved in a bank account. So just at your bank. It's not being used. It's there for the rainy day when you have a flat tire and and then all of a sudden you have a bigger auto bill than you anticipated, or your roof needs some work, that kind of thing. Secondly, minimize your high interest debt. If you have credit cards that are unpaid that are accumulating a very high interest rate, I would consider paying that down as much as possible before you really start allocating some of your personal savings to a college education fund. And that's simply because what the amount that you could save would sort of be less impactful than the amount of paying down the debt, because that's accumulating interest at a high rate. And then lastly, I would encourage you to make sure that you have your own retirement savings plan set up before you really get serious about your saving for your child's college education costs, because it's going to be a great benefit to your kids if you can help them offset the cost of college. But if by the time you're trying to retire, you have nothing saved and then you need to move in with your kids, that's also going to be a difficult conversation to have. So starting your own retirement savings early and often, I would say, is an advisable strategy to have in place before really getting serious about saving specifically for your child's college education costs. But let's say you've checked those boxes. You got the emergency fund, you're paying down your debt, and you have a retirement plan set up. Saving for college is very similar to saving for retirement. And what I have here is a chart that shows just how impactful the power of making small savings along the way and investing that money along the way will help you achieve your financial goals. So on the left-hand column, you have a person with 15 years until their anticipated college education start date. And on the right-hand column, you have a person that has 5 years until their anticipated college start date. So the bottom amount is the same in both situations. But in order to get there, you only had to save $200 a month when you had 15 years of planning, versus $940 a month in terms of savings when you had 5 years. So you can see that the total amount saved over those two time periods, in the 15-year time period, you only had to put away $36,000, versus in the 5-year time period, that same amount that you were saving actually accumulated was equivalent to $56,400. But if you're getting an 8% rate of return, and this is again a hypothetical, but the stock market has averaged anywhere between 7 and 9% annually, so that's why we went with 8. An 8% return on those two investments leaves you with the same amount. So this is a little bit of a complicated and advanced strategy. That's where you're actively, saving money for college in an investment account. But this is just sort of an example of how powerful the time value of money can be. This is very similar to your retirement equation. This is why when you have access to a 401k, or maybe you have set up your own individual IRA, the general recommendation is that you're saving often and just systematically, and you're just putting it in along the way. So my recommendation in terms of having a savings strategy is to actually people talk about, what's your voting plan? Have a plan. I know I'm going to go the day of, or maybe I'm going to be mailing my ballot in, or whatever it is, but just decide what it is you're going to do. And then say the same thing applies in saving for college education. So one way to do that would be to open an account specifically for college education savings. So that could be at your bank, or it could be in an investment account, but just make it like the one place that you're putting the money that you're saving for this cost. And if you can, set up automatic contributions. Really, we talk about paying yourself first when we're saying saving for retirement, and I think it's kind of similar for your college education savings. If you've identified that you want to save for college for a child or for yourself, don't think twice about it. Don't make it a decision you're making at the end of the month after you see how much you have left after you've paid off all your bills. Make it the first payment you make It's $100, it's $200, whatever you can afford, and just make it automatic. And then create a little bit of a barrier to access. So one strategy I personally like is, for my savings account, I don't have a debit card for that. I've literally created a separate account. So if I want to take money out of it, I actually have to go to the bank and I have to talk to a person and say, hey, I actually need to take some money out of here. And that's simply a barrier. So I'm not doing a transfer online just to pay off my, fun dinner I had one night or whatever. I'm creating a barrier so I know, no, that's set aside for something specific and I don't want to use it for something else. The second question you might ask is, if you're saving for college, whose name are you putting it in? If you have it in your own name, you have a lot more control, and it actually can, by putting it in the child's name directly, not only are you losing control, but it can have a negative impact on your FAFSA score. So keeping it on in your own name can actually have a beneficial impact from that perspective. Not to mention that if the child decides, hey, well, I got all this money, I'm just going to buy a new car, they sort of missed the point about how hard it was to save for college and why you were doing that. So this is kind of getting towards. Let's assume that you weren't just putting it into a checking account, the money that you wanted to save on a regular basis, but you wanted to put it into an investment account. One of the questions that you have to answer when you create an investment account is, how conservative or aggressive do you want to be? And this unfortunately, this presentation, we can't really cover everything, because truly to understand what investing entails and what it means to be conservative and what it means to be aggressive entails a larger conversation about investing in general. Long story short, you have two main options when it comes to investing. You have stocks and you have bonds. Stocks are when you actually when you own a piece of a company. So, for example, Apple, Google, Target, Walmart. These are publicly traded companies, and you can buy and sell shares of that company on the stock market. Historically, like we said, the stock market has returned between 7 and 9% on an annual basis. This isn't a recommendation that you should go out and buy any of those specific companies. It was more so to say, when you're buying in the stock market, you're buying into, you own pieces of companies. And as those companies do well, then the value of your ownership in those companies will actually increase. So because you owned a share of that company, of company X, when that company does well, the value of your share grows over time. And when the company does poorly, it goes down. On the other side of the coin, you have fixed income, and fixed income is another word for bonds. And bonds are typically a little bit more conservative. So, maybe you've seen in the news, there's been, this company came out, it went public, and it's up 100%. So if you had invested $1, now it's worth $100. Fixed income is definitely not going to have that kind of return. Fixed income returns have been maybe between around 4% versus that 7% for stocks. But the role fixed income plays is that it allows you to continue making money without taking on so much risk as a stock. So you have sort of volatility in the stock market, and bonds are a little bit volatile, but just not as much as stocks. And by volatility, I mean the value of your shares goes up and down. Generally, over time with stocks, it's a general upward trend. It's that 7%, 8% we're talking about. Bonds similarly have a general upward trend, but it's just not quite as much. So when you're choosing an investment for your college education savings, the level of what we call conservative or aggressive needs to be sort of aligned with the amount of time you have until college. So this is just one way of visualizing that. But in this chart, what you see is that on the left, with the bottom left, it says 18. That's because there's 18 years before college. So in this situation, that blue component of the chart is a reflection of stocks. And not even all stocks are created equally. Some stocks are more aggressive than others, and some stocks are more conservative. For example, I guess I won't get too much into it, but the shading of the blue is more conservative versus more aggressive stocks. And Over time, what you're seeing with the green bar coming up is the fixed income portion of your portfolio increasing. So as you get closer to college, you generally want your investment to be a little bit more conservative rather than aggressive. At the 18 years before college, if the stock market goes up, great. But also if it goes down, it's not that big of a deal because you actually have 18 years for the stock market to, you know, theoretically come back. Again, stocks involved, investing in the stock market involves risk, and I can't guarantee you that it's going to behave in the way that we're talking about right now. But you talk to a financial advisor, and they will affirm that over time, even after in this year, for example, in March, the stock market was down 30% approximately, and we've basically regained all of that. So if you needed to access your money the day after the stock market was down 30%, you have 30% less in your account, and that's going to impact your ability to achieve your financial goal. But if you have the time to allow your investment to recover, then it doesn't matter what it's doing on any given day because you have enough time for the stock market to recover. And then by the time you're actually using that money, you've become more conservative in your investment, and then we're good to go. I know that was a ton of information all at once, and this is not designed to be like a one and done kind of introduction to investing, but that was a very high level overview of when you're investing, when you're saving for college. How you want to invest your savings is going to depend on how long you have until you're expecting to go to school. So that's one component of it. That is, what are you investing in? But then the second piece is, how are you investing? So you have a number of different options when it comes to the kind of account that you might open for a college savings plan. So this top line here, 529 plans, and right below that, Coverdell Education Savings Accounts. These are two account types that are actually specifically designed for college education savings or higher learning costs, or even just education expenses in general. So the government, similar to a 401k or IRA, where they've created tax incentives for participating in these programs to offset the cost of retirement. In the case of an IRA or a 401k, it's very similar with a 529 plan or a Coverdell Education Savings Account, is that you can get, you have minimal tax you have minimal tax impact from the growth in the account. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in more in a minute. And then, so those are the what we'd call tax advantaged investments, where you have a tax benefit. Below that, you could save for college with CDs, just get your certificate of deposit. You could just buy stocks and bonds directly, or you can, maybe you have a house that you're planning on selling to fund college. Those investment strategies, well, you certainly, if you can you can write the check at the end of the day, that will help offset the cost of college, but it might not have been the most effective strategy from a tax planning perspective. So with 529 plans, there's a couple different versions. This is one called the prepaid tuition plan. Basically, you can cover the cost of tuition in today's dollars, but it's not a guarantee of enrollment by any stretch of the imagination. A slightly more common version of the 529 plan than the prepaid one is just the college savings plan, and this is where people are more so, saving along the way. Basically, the benefit of using a 529 plan for investing when you're saving for college is that any earnings, any appreciation in the value of your account, if you're using it for qualified education expenses, you don't pay any taxes on those earnings. Versus when you say, if I bought a stock, I have my phone. Here's my one share of Apple, right? So this is my phone. Again, it's not an endorsement of Apple, but let's just say, for example, I own my one share. It was worth $100 when I bought it, and when I sell it, it's worth $1,000. So it went up in value from 100 to 1,000. If I directly own that one share of Apple, I'm going to pay capital gains tax on the $900 of growth. So I don't just get to take that free and clear. My cost basis is $100. It grew to $1,000, so I'm paying capital gains tax on $900. And you can get even more specific than that. There's short-term and long-term capital gains, but just remember, you're paying tax on the growth. With a 529 plan, if I invested $100 in a 529 plan and it grew to $1,000, and then I took that money to pay for college, I wouldn't owe any taxes on that growth. So that's one of the really powerful tools that we have in the arsenal for college education planning is the 529 plan. It's very flexible. It is, quite a versatile program. I would consider this homework. Google 529 plan at the end of this, and you can see what you can and can't buy in there. There's some restrictions. There's some state-by-state specific information. If you're not a member of a Latino, if you're not a Los Angelino, rather, if you're not a member of Los Angeles or in California, and you're in another state, that you actually might have a specific 529 plan in your state, and it can be tax advantaged even at a more specific level. So Google 529 plan at the end of all this. Coverdell education savings accounts. These are similar to 529 plans, a little bit different. There is a lower annual contribution limit. It's $2,000 annually. This might be a little bit out of date, but it's a little slightly more restrictive. So ESA is another term you can Google and get a little bit more information about this. But again, it's considered one of these tax advantaged strategies for saving for college. U.S. savings bonds, again, I personally actually am not too familiar with U.S. savings bonds, but this is a slightly more tax incentivized strategy for saving for college. This piece on taxable investments, again, this is just to kind of give you the comparison. A taxable investment, if you sell it to pay for college, you're going to pay taxes on it, versus a 529 plan or one of these other methods we were talking about, you wouldn't owe taxes on it. So not only what you invest in, but how you invest in is an important piece of the conversation when you're talking about funding higher education costs. This slide is just to talk a little bit about, okay, maybe you're coming to the table and saying, hey, I got a kid, or I'm personally trying to attend college in just a couple years. I don't really have that much time for investments and, or the capital available necessarily. It's not to say that all hope is lost. There is a number of resources available to you, and part of, this is where I would come back to the motivation piece that we had at the end. There's a saying, where there's a will, there's a way, and I firmly believe in that. I know that circumstances are different for everyone, and it's for some people, it's going to be a lot harder to reach this college education goal than someone else. And some people are going to need to take out loans, and other people won't. But again, I would encourage you to not lose hope, and remember that if you are determined and you want to get the benefit of a higher education, go for it. Do it with your eyes wide open, and take it one step at a time. So I covered a lot of information here, and really this, like I said earlier, this is not designed to be sort of a one and done program. Talking to a financial professional really can help you coordinate your college education savings strategy with your total financial plan. And, basically, this is just one piece of the puzzle. College education is one piece of the puzzle. And if you are considering how you can help your child offset the cost of that, that is fantastic. That is amazing. But tie it into the larger piece. Tie it into your own personal financial well-being. What is your debt situation looking like? What is your retirement situation looking like? And what other goals do you have? And also, talk about what if something happened to you. I mean, so much of the conversation around money is not just the logic element, but it's the emotional piece. Have the conversation with your family around, what does money mean to you? This is what my experience was like. Maybe your financial circumstances right now are a lot different than what they were like when you were growing up, and your spouse doesn't know that, or your children don't know that. Talk to them about what a dollar means to you. And so when you're talking about a big ticket item like the cost of college, that you can help contextualize, why is this sometimes a difficult conversation for you to have. It's like, oh well, you might not know this, but when I was younger, money was tight, and so I take a dollar seriously. So that is part of the conversation that hopefully your financial planner is encouraging you to have with your family members and with them. And you're not just isolating college education savings as the one piece of the puzzle you're trying to solve for. So what we covered here, a little bit about the motivation, the benefits of a college education, sources of financial aid. There are a lot of really good resources out there. And if you have questions right now, we have a team that is answering them on the comments section. And hopefully you got some valuable information here also about, some of the specific information around investing and, how to think about it from a dollar perspective, and how a financial planner can help you along the way. Please make Google your friend. I know you already do. I'm Googling things all the time, maybe almost to a fault. But when it comes to planning for college, start early, start often. Really, keep in touch with the guidance counselors. The who knows, even at elementary school, maybe someone there knows a little bit about seeing a child that has already graduated and has gone on and is really successful. So tap into your network, talk to the people who have gone through this before, and don't be afraid to ask questions. The Financial Planning Association is also a really great resource. So you can go fpanet.org, or you can go fpa.studentaid. We are here to talk to you about your options when it comes to financial planning. Here's a little bit more specific information about finding a financial planner specifically. Really, one of the biggest recommendations I can make when it comes to finding a qualified financial advisor is making sure that they're not talking to you about one thing and one thing only. If someone, one of my favorite analogies is this: if you only have a hammer, everything's going to look like a nail. So if someone tells you, I have this one investment solution, and that is the right investment vehicle for you, no matter if you came and talked to me about college or retirement or anything else, I would consider getting a second opinion, because the investment universe is very large and a lot of things need to be taken into consideration. So look for that comprehensive approach for your financial planning needs. So I think that that's about it from the presentation on my end. Maybe if anyone on the back end can clue me into some specific informations or maybe content I went through too quickly, I'd be happy to kind of open it up at this point.
Sure. Hi, thank you so much, Grant. I think a lot of the questions have been answered by the chat, but there maybe are a couple or one or two that haven't yet, maybe. So one of them is, can these tax advantage programs be used for expenses incurred for college out of country?
That's a really good question, and I have looked into this in the past. In the way so I'm most specifically familiar with a 529 plan, so I'm going to speak to that because there are the ESA plans and the tax savings bonds. But with a 529 plan, there are qualified institutions, and most institutions in the United States will qualify, and some outside of the United States. So you are able to, if you have a specific institution in mind, you would be able to speak with a financial advisor that can help you setting up a 529 plan and say, would I be able to use a 529 plan for this institution? And then they would be able to help you answer that question. But short answer, yes, you can use it for foreign institutions, but I would caveat that by saying probably not all institutions that are outside of the United States.
Okay, that's good to know. There's one more question. I have completed my bachelor's degree and considering going for my master. However, I have been informed there's less financial resources for master programs. What do you recommend financially?
Well, one would be, kind of like the method we went through here is one is to take a look at what is the total cost of the program and say, okay, so because not all programs are created equally. You can, I did a certification program from UCLA Extension that was, much cheaper. I'm going to assume than a 3-year master's in fine arts at a private institution in New York. So, I would first start by taking a look at the total cost of the program, and then I would also look at what is your anticipated earning potential as a result of having achieved that certification. So that level of education. So because also not all career paths are going to have the same earning potential. So because that to me, why that would be a helpful tool is to say, okay, if I'm going to take on X amount of debt, and I know that, all things considered, I could reasonably expect to land a job after that that's going to be earning me approximately this amount. This is how long it's going to take for me to pay down that debt. And that's assuming that there's no resources available like in this scenario. So that's what I mean by you kind of having your eyes open when you're going into it. Just kind of look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, I'm comfortable with what that means because I'm passionate about this program. I believe in what I would learn here. I believe in that kind of work. Or am I, pursuing this for a reason that's not, that motivating to me? And if I, at the end of the day, was stuck paying this bill, worst case scenarios, you graduate and then you decide you don't want to go into that field at all. And then maybe you're stuck paying for a education that you're not using. So I think that would be the worst case scenario.
And then we've got a couple more questions, I think. Can you go over a bit more about what happens to the 529 if the child decides not to go to college? Can it be transferred to another relative?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a great question. 529 plans are very flexible. So let's say I name my son as the beneficiary of my 529. So the way so back up just a step. So 529 plan has an account owner and an account beneficiary. So I might own the account, but it's for the benefit of this person over here. That's not necessarily me. So I'm going to open it up for the benefit of my son. And then let's say he decides not to go to college. Okay, no big deal. I have a couple options there. One, I can take the money back. So any money that you put into a 529 plan, you can withdraw. You would, in that instance, pay a penalty for not using it for education costs. I think it's a 10%. You would pay income on the growth, and it's a 10% penalty. So you're not really incentivized to take it out, but you can. So let's say you don't want to take it out yourself because you have another child in the household or maybe a relative that could benefit from that 529 plan. You can change the beneficiary. So my son didn't go to college, but my daughter is going to college. I'm going to just change the beneficiary on that account, and they can now get the benefit of that 529 plan.
Oh, that's awesome. Is there a limit to how many changes you can make in terms of the beneficiary?
I want to say maybe like once a year, twice a year. I don't think you could do it all the time. I don't think you would need to either, but I don't think realistically that there's a limit. But I also don't see people changing it all that often either.
Sure. Awesome. Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions. What? Oh, I think we got one more. I'm sorry. Can a 529 plan from one state be transferred to another state? For example, California 529 to Oregon 529.
Well, my understanding of the state-specific differences is that if you're contributing to your state's 529 plan, that you can get potentially a reduction in your tax, like the tax you owe for like state income in the year you make the contribution. I could be a little bit wrong there. You can definitely use a 529 plan no matter what state you end up going to college in, no matter where that 529 plan is domiciled. I think that the specific state to state difference is about the income tax benefit to you. But I would caveat that with saying, take a look at your state's 529 plan and just kind of read the fine print. I don't want to give you false information, but bottom line, no matter what state the 529 plan you have is from, you can use that for any institution.
Okay. And I guess there's a follow-up question also about 529. Does it have to transfer to a relative or any other child? So I'm assuming maybe an adult who wants to use it for education.
Yeah. So no, it's a great question. There's a pretty broad definition of who you are allowed to transfer the 529 to, and um, in the instance that here's I'm not sure if this is necessarily going to answer the question, but maybe in part it does. If I wanted to, I could open up a five. I actually don't have a child yet, so I used my hypothetical son in this instance. But so let's say I'm planning on having a child, and I'm just wanting to get ahead of the curve in terms of saving for college. I could open up a 529 account for the benefit of myself. Or let's say I'm just going to go to college and then I'm planning on going back to school in 10 years. I could open up a 529 plan for the benefit of myself. I think this is where talking with your financial advisor would potentially come into play and say, hey, this is something I'm considering doing. What do you think would be the most effective technique for accomplishing this?
And I think, I think the person's clarified. I guess meaning, can I gift it to a friend's child?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They're not a family member.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because you could do it two ways. So, all right, so my best friend's child, basically my nephew, and I want to support them and go into college. So I could open up a 529 plan that I own for the benefit of that child, and we can make contributions. And the benefit there is that I actually own it, and if whatever happens with that friend, maybe at the end of the day, or I need that money, I can access it. I have control over it. Alternatively, you could work with your friend, say, hey, I really believe in these 529 plans. I'd love for you to open it up and own it, and for the benefit of your child. And then maybe that would be a difficult conversation to have, but a lot of times people do have 529 plans, and maybe grandparents or relatives or friends at the child's birthday say, hey, I know you don't need any more toys. I'd love to make a contribution to your education planning. I know you guys are, really value higher education. Here's a check for, $250, whatever you want to give. They could put that into the 529 plan. So you don't have to be, and I think that's one of the things that's powerful about a 529 plan is that I can open it up for the benefit of my son, and my parents can make contributions to that account. They're going to help me pay for college. So, and it's similar with friends. I will say the one downside potentially to being a non-relative who has assets saved for college for another person is potentially could have a negative impact on FAFSA. It gets a little complicated because, like, even if grandparents have a 529 plan for the benefit of their grandchildren rather than their children, I do believe that's factored in differently than if the parents had the same amount saved in a 529 plan for the benefit of their kids. So again, I would encourage you to talk to your financial advisor about and go to this plan specifics information here in the chat for some of the detailed information.
Yeah, there's some great links that got posted in the chat, so people can look more into that. Yes, yeah, okay, and I think that's all the questions
Awesome.
for today. We had a lot of interesting questions. Thank you so much, Grant, for all that great information and sticking with us and answering all the questions. And thank you guys for asking the questions, and thank you guys for being here with us this evening. And I think, that being said, I guess, thank you so much, and hopefully come back here tomorrow for our next financial workshop. And thank you so much.
And thank you to the LA Public Library. I love the LA Public Library. You guys are my heroes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you to the Financial Planning Association. Support your local library.